In this tutorial, we will be setting up Digital Performer to record and edit audio using the NRV10 mixer and a microphone. First off, you want to check the hardware routing. Go to Setup, Configure Audio System, Configure Hardware Driver, and be sure that the NRV10 multi-channel is selected. You might also want to note the buffer size depending on what you're working on. If you're recording using the microphone and listening back to other tracks that are already recorded, you'll want a low buffer setting so you don't experience latency monitoring the microphone. However, this puts more strain on the computer, so you can't play as many tracks or effects. So if you're just playing back pre-recorded audio and doing mixing, you want to use a higher buffer setting. We'll leave it at the intermediate setting for now. If the NRV10 doesn't show up in this list, there's a couple troubleshooting things you can do. First off, be sure the power is turned on the NRV10. If it still doesn't show up, go back to Setup and open the Apple sound driver. That's Open Audio MIDI Setup. And you should see for default input and default output an NRV10 multi-channel choice. So choose that for both the input and the output if it's not already selected. And then quit Audio MIDI Setup. Next, we need to make some tracks. So if we go under Project, Add Track, notice there's two types of audio tracks, mono and stereo. For our microphone, we'll use a mono audio track. For any audio that we're going to rip from a CD or from audio samples or phrases, we'll probably use stereo audio tracks. So I'll create a mono track and a stereo track. You can tell the difference between the type of track by this little squiggly here. If the squiggly is a single squiggly, it's a monophonic audio track. If it's two squigglies, it's a stereo audio track. Alright, next is to check the input and output routing for the tracks. The output routing will always be the same for all tracks. That's the routing that goes to your headphones. In the lab, by default, we use output analog 7 and 8. That's shown here. So you'd want to be sure that that's selected for all your tracks. For this tutorial, I'm going to leave that set at analog 1 and 2. We'll review that in the lab handbook in just a minute. For the input, we don't need any input set for any tracks that we're going to be dragging audio in from a CD or another source. We only need input set if we're recording from a microphone or some external source. The setting you'll choose here depends on where you have the microphone plugged in on the NRV10. I'll be using analog 1. In the lab, by default, we sometimes use analog 3 or channel 3 as our input. So you would choose that here. There's multi-channel analog 3. For now, I'm going to leave it at analog 1. So let's take a look in the handbook at the NRV10. Okay, here's the top of the mixer. By default, we plug the microphone in this input here. So if you were to have chosen analog 3 as the input for your mono audio track, you'd plug in the microphone here. Let's take a closer look. You'd plug the microphone in here. If you're running a microphone through an effects box, or if you have a guitar or some other instrument and you're running it through a preamp, you can take the preamp output and plug it in here where it says line in. Depending what you have plugged in, if you have something plugged in the microphone jack, you'll want this switch to be up. That's the mic line button. If you have something plugged into the line input, you'll want this button to be down. Later on, once you start speaking into the microphone, we'll use this knob, the gain, to adjust the level going into Digital Performer. This is the only knob you have to move to change the gain going into Digital Performer. You do not need to move the fader or anything else down at the bottom of the mixer. So this controls the input exclusively. And reviewing what I said about the outputs, normally we send our outputs to channel 7 and 8, and you have this button depressed here, which is the FireWire button. And then you turn up the headphone fader and you should be hearing a signal. Consult the handbook for a more detailed explanation. Okay, back to Digital Performer. Okay, a couple of other things you might want to set at this point. You might want to rename your tracks. If you rename the track, for instance, if I rename this track by holding down the Option key and clicking on its name, once I've done some recording and I have some audio files in my audio files folder and some sound bites here, they will take this name as the file name. So it'll be easy to tell the difference. It won't just be called Audio 1, Audio 2, whatever. Before recording, you'll want to open the audio monitor window so you can check the level going into Digital Performer. We go under Studio, Audio Monitor, see a new window. This is the signal from the microphone that's plugged in input analog 1. Earlier I had some clipping, so it's showing me that, so I can select that to turn that off. Now the level of the input is not set anywhere in Digital Performer. It's set outside in the hardware on the NRV10. So let's look at that for a moment. My microphone is currently plugged into this input, microphone 1. So the input analog 1 here matches mic 1 here. So I would turn this gain knob if I wanted to change the level going into Digital Performer. So I'll do that now. You'll hear my voice kind of go away. I'm going to turn it down first. Test, 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 test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I turned it up high enough to get clipping. So I'm backing off and I'm setting the level between -6 and -12 dB, which is a good safe level. So once you've done all that, you're ready to record and to drop audio files in and begin editing them.